So you go to Shanghai, they are receiving imports as the biggest miner and provider. So you're talking about a black hole for gold. You're digging up the most in the whole world, and you're bringing it in from everybody else. Geez, these guys are stacking on an unbelievable scale. They are the ultimate stackers. When people finally say, okay, who's got what? I think the world's going to be shocked.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special from May 23rd through May 30th, 2023, while supplies last. This week we feature the Ital Preziosi 10-ounce silver bars at just $3.49 over spot per ounce. Frequently, you have to choose between high-volume bars like 1,000-ounce bars to get low premiums, or pay a higher premium for more liquidity. But these Ital Preziosi 10-ounce bars not only maintain a great level of liquidity from a respected mint, but also boast one of our lowest premiums in several months at $3.49 over spot per ounce while supplies last. They come individually numbered, are available in any quantity, and come 50 to a box. They are also IRA eligible. If you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. To order these specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're delighted to have this returning guest. Francis Hunt is the founder of themarketsniper.com, and he joins us again this Wednesday, May 24, 2023. Francis, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Delighted to be back on. Thank you for asking me.
I've been intrigued since I first heard several months ago you interviewing on the topic of whether we have, in fact, enough thought put towards the end game that we may be approaching and the entrapment that may be laid out for us, the cattle gates that are already planned to herd the herds into, and the goads, whether it's psychological or physical, that we use to get people to go into those gates and into those traps. We've often talked with others on our channel about how physical precious metals and other tangible assets, whether it's productive farmland, etc., are in a class of their own, together with other commodities, in having real intrinsic value that can help to protect people in times of failures of derivative-based or fiat-based financial systems, and considering that perhaps financial threat and risks is one of the greatest ones we're a clear and present danger that we're facing. Although we've certainly seen in the past 3 years a sort of a global alignment and surprising lockstep marching of many different countries to non-financial topic that certainly restricted people's lives and caused huge financial and physical problems for people as well. So one of the things we'd really like to get your latest thinking on is your big picture of what you see as, who's really calling the shots, who's really planning our future and our destiny for us, what the big picture looks like in terms of what you've referred to as right-sizing the world, and how ordinary people in the cheap seats, where most of us find ourselves, can still take prudent action to minimize the likelihood of serious harm to us and to our children, our grandchildren going forward. So that's a lot to unpack, but if we could just start with maybe that big picture view that you have of those who've been planning the future of most of others in the world for a long, long time.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I think you've gone straight to the sweet spot. There's a lot of people in the gold space that say the following, and it's well rehearsed, and we all repeat it like a mantra. Fiat failure, system failure, debt failure, buy precious metals. B, don't keep them in bank vaults. C, have some physically and maybe private vaulting or a bit of midnight gardening as you choose, etc. And then that's largely it. We don't go too much beyond that. We think we reach a point where we've now thrown up the invisible force field and we are protected from all things. Bullets and ray beams, Star Wars, it's just going to bounce and skim and ricochet away, and we're going to be 100% protected. And all my approaches to what I consider being a futurist in reset times are based on rational, on balance of probability assessments about what our enemy or the countervailing force is going to do. And when you're in these situations, one of the most dangerous things is to underestimate the force of the people that are largely, we have to assess, winning this game after the environment of the events of March 2020, the fact that they were able to shut down the entire planet, largely, certainly the Western hemispheres, and get away with all that they did. The fact that we don't see any justice for many of those things and much great blowback. Yes, many people are working. Many people are trying. I applaud that and I continue to support that. And many people want to see hope. And I say, well, rational thought first. Outcomes are what matter. So in that environment, we can't underestimate the people that have access to AI, Aladdin, and all computer models, all the resources, all the force of the world, actually. In fact, we've transitioned, in my opinion, into a form already, although as yet unacknowledged, of a new world order. In other words, it's quite clear to see that there are transnational organizations that are determining policies broadly for entire nations that bypass national governments, elections, were never elected, and have material threat value, material power that they are flexing. It's also clear from the way that they brag, which is now they have such confidence they have representatives of the World Economic Forum, largely at the top tables as implementers, localized representatives. They are not working for you. They are working for those that gave them the power. So power is something that you serve your ultimate master. The great fragmented individual voter is largely not even that material to these people, where you have the force of money, policy, non-governmental organizations, foundations of philanthropists. These are the great criminals that dress up as the great givers. So it is an inversion, perversion world. And so bringing this back to the question before we go on a general rant about the state of geopolitics and their hierarchies, you have to bear in mind that you are fighting a multi-armed villain. We talk about the octopus, the vampire squid, when we refer to Goldman Sachs and the banking system. There are many, many arms that will grab you with suckers on them, and you need to not think that you have now done all that you can do, and it's time just to sit. That just the purchase of gold, burying it under the pool pump, or whatever the case is what you do. So I've explored a number of things around this, and even still, I do not consider myself suitably prepared. In other words, they game theory, the natural responses, and without a doubt, the gold bug, as we are referred to, which is kind of a derogatory, we're an insect. Actually, we're sound money proponents that seek to have an established a totally fungible asset by which we can control governments from overspending, and we're schools of Mises, Austrian, etc. But they will characterize you as a gold bug. I think that's a derogatory term. I never referred to myself as that. And it's also a believer. It's almost like a cult. So they like to, as cults themselves, they like to project cultism upon you. As if, because generally those are stigmatized things that have phraseology. So we have to watch language and everything else. But precious metals holders should recognize that they probably think, and probably do, have a very elaborate plan for us specifically. But you might say, they're going to be happy. Everybody else gets wrecked. They have loans, they're financed, they're digital, and they'll allow this gold bug class to continue to remain mass affluent, and in fact, in terms of CBDC coins, if gold relatively has a free market of some form, even on the black market, that we're all going to be quietly rich and have bypassed this great event that's going to befall us in the reset. I would say you're under-planned and under-resourced. So the question then becomes, so what will their plan be? And how will you circumvent those additional levels? So the conversation for me starts now when we start discussing what else they could do. There were a lot of negative comments when I actually dealt with this topic the first time, I think, that you're referring to. That doesn't mean everybody didn't enjoy the video. Sometimes the people who comment are the people that are most afraid. But I am not, let's just reiterate, looking to keep people out of metals because they might have a plan of confiscation. They might have some other form of registration that leads to confiscation or taxation, or, who knows the many attack vectors they can do. I still assess that precious metals is one of the most soundest things you can do to insulate yourself from what will probably be most effective attack on digital things, the digital dollar, the dollar in the bank accounts, the binary money in computers, which are the easiest to write down, and the debt and the valuations of pensions with bonds, et cetera, et cetera. So physicality and metals remains my solution. But I think you have to look at jurisdictions. You have to look at multiple jurisdictions. And in spite of saying that, I'm also saying that may not still be enough on account of the fact that this is a transnational force. But there will be inefficiencies generally. We will be the bugs. Essentially, we're cockroaches in a nuclear event. We've got to hide in the cracks. And there are inefficiencies across national borders, even if and when there are World Health Organizations and transnational power structures above that are dictating down. At the local level, there are arbitrage opportunities. So the first thing I would say, and the first thing I would put forward as an answer to the detailed question you asked, is have multiple jurisdictions. Your audience may be dominantly American, for example, and they may have most of their holdings in America. I'm here to say you need some structures that are legal entities that survive even when you die, that have automatically your wish list and use the weapons that they use to weaponize against us. So we talk about foundation and trust structures. We do this for many people. And let them be of other nation states so that you have different language, different law, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there's some structural cost, and many people go, oh, I don't want to do that. That could be the metal that survives, that reestablishes your balance sheet. That third that you have there could be the one that survives. I'm working on a model that actually very few of my things will pass this test. But the truth of the matter is, if you've done enough and you've got enough options, one or two will still set you up for life and probably your next generations. If the contraction, the right sizing of the global economy, which I'm seeing both on a population, on a food supply chain size and everything, that dictates the overlording people that see themselves as the priestly classes are clearly going through a stratagem. That is seeing that. So I'm afraid to say we are probably facing a killing era for the great underprepared, not just in terms of financials, but also even in terms of your own life span. So it's quite a dark, sounds a bit black pill. But I want to recognize the world for what I am seeing, the anecdotes, and rationally what they probably portend to. And if it's a dark time and it's turning night, I'm not going to say it's not night as the sun is setting.
One of the things that you mentioned in passing at the beginning was that this has been going on for a long time. And if you could maybe touch back on that people may have a gut sense of that. People know that there's been a sense of overlords and underlings for a long, long time in all cultures, in all parts of history, and that we've been seeing more and more. Perhaps it's because we have access to more information now than most people did in the past, that it's sort of the cards are being revealed perhaps a bit more than they have in the past. And people are saying, wait a minute, we see the same playbooks being used again and again, this thing about crisis and then action response. And then the outcome seems to be, we're told that it's being sold as a solution to the crisis, but the outcome seems to be always loss of privacy, loss of freedom, loss of sovereignty, that sort of thing. It's like, well, how does that solve the problem if that was really the problem? And then the dust blows over, and now we're on to the next problem before people realize, wait a minute, there was nothing ever actually done to address the root causes if this thing really was a problem. And these strategies that have been used perhaps since time immemorial to kind of manipulate herds of people. Can you touch on that? Because you've done quite a bit of research in that regard.
Yes, I mean, I've just finished my study for today. So every day I'm studying on the history of mankind. In essence, there's been teachings and learnings of deception and manipulation that has been passed on inside a bloodline of classes that has actually transcended many multiple cycles and across national geographies. So in other words, for example, from Genghis Khan across India, right the way through Middle East, Mesopotamia, and their great histories, the skills of the ruling classes knew these things, but it was a hidden knowledge. There's an asymmetry. It's quite mundane for people to think that a small ruling class would give you all access to all historical information. When they are low in numbers, and they seek to control you, they will seek an asymmetry themselves of benefit that you do not have. And that's why most of our technology, by the way, even in a simplistic, more modernistic sense, comes through the military-industrial complex, which is controlled by these ruling classes. So you look at Bluetooth, you look at the Tor browser of secrecy and various other things. They are spawned through the military-industrial complex. And in fact, we've said you have to almost hold your nose and buy. In the equity markets now, you've got close to highs in the military-industrial complex. You're being essentially the tax-paying classes are funding a segment that the overlording priestly classes are using to weaponize to control you. So you are paying for your own enslavement. So reducing your taxation liability is to reduce your contribution to your own enslavement. Multiple locations, structures. These aren't things that clever dicks do. These are smart things that everyday people should and are affordable enough to do to stop contributing to your own slavery and to start having arbitrage options and being a man that can shapeshift in the way that they appear to do. You're against a very, very organized but inverted force. It is inverted to you. And we get sold that. We get sold good principles at the lower levels. Be honest, be truthful. That's highly useful for them in managing us because we get asked to tell the truth and we spill all the beans every time to them, and principles. So it's very useful to have a righteous, well-principled population that will give you all the information they have and know honestly just because you asked, whilst they behave in an inverse way to maintain their natural control over you. So we have to recognize that this is a spiritual war, it's a macroeconomic war, and I feel for the first time this is going to be their move where they will actually coordinate the entire planet. So this is a sort of really big cyclical move. We've gone through the communism versus capitalism. I mentioned the thesis. They control both the thesis and the antithesis. And the real outcome is the synthesis. So they start with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, great American, whenever you set a goal, start with the end in mind and then break down the steps. They start with the end in mind, but they create two warring factions. So it's always been a good versus evil, a binary. You had George Bush use that very simple phrasing, we are the good, they are the evil, when he wanted to go into Iraq and the events of 9/11, etc., etc. So we are easily manipulated. They start with a demonization of something. The Russians bad, the Chinese bad, we good, etc., etc. And now you're getting, on a cultural level, you're getting a bit of a white man bad, etc., etc. So this is how they set up a future war. They are preparing people for a potential genocide, possibly by stigmatizing a particular nation. Now, this has gotten very far away from gold and silver. But the point of the matter is, without recognizing the scale of this game, you need to realize that financial money and holding gold and silver is but a small silver on that, and they are very aware of what they will characterize as how do we strip away the wealth of gold bugs. Because essentially the end game is a kind of Bolshevik communism, which is a ruling class and then equality. They will preach the benefits of equalness and equality. What that actually means is unilateral serfdom, where you have no greater privilege over everyone else because you largely all have close to nothing or nothing, as the World Economic Forum has recently known. What that actually means is we strip you of your assets. But I could sell you the merit of not owning a car, for example, Dunnigan, by saying Dunnigan, your car sits in your garage for 23 hours out of 24. You're only using it an hour a day. You over-resourced. We could be more efficient. You could have a right to utilize and have it just dropped off just before you need it, and that car could be serving 10 other families, and it'll be, and we can create lots of very convincing narrative for why you don't have to even own it. You can rent it. You don't have to pay the insurance. You'll just be included in your payment of use, etc., etc. So there's a lot of cunning efficiency. That's all part and parcel. And you could argue Uber is the beginning of that. That resources, you don't need this whole thing of, your resources dictate over you. You should own nothing. State as provider. That is UBI. That is everything else. Now, with the robotics and the AI era, the need for human resource is getting greatly reduced, which is another reason why I see the right sizing of the food chain that will create shortages at the same time as we're seeing a lot of excess deaths. I won't visit that any deeper, but there is clearly more required. So I feel we are in the corporation planet Earth with a CEO that's talking about right sizing. And that means on every level. That's headcount, salaries, how much food you get at the canteen, etc., etc. So there's a lot more to be prepared for in this discussion, and they will have a plan for us as hoarders if your sole goal is just to keep at your home. And it may start with, please register your precious metals. Failure to do so, a draconian sentence, like 15 years in jail. So they terrify everyone into doing it.
And you omitted there so far, I'm sure you were going to get to it, was the icing on the cake is, because you're virtuous, you would want to do this because only if you had nefarious ends, only if you were a terrorist, only if you were the enemy of the people, enemy of the state, would you be harboring this secret hoard to do horrible things. Yeah.
There was a beautiful thread that counted, if you've got nothing to hide, you would have no problem with giving us that information. The proverbial government extraction process. Why? You'd only want to withhold us. And it gave an entire historical read of everything that governments have perpetuated and why privacy is actually a gift and right for the citizen, and governments should not have access to that. And I think that's also what you were referring to in your response, and thank you for bringing that one up. So it would almost be unhuman, unchristian to lie, withhold, or do anything. And what I'm saying to you is, you're in a war with a demonic force, and you should serve self and like-minded community and family. And in essence, you may well seek to make absolute use of all your privacy, and you should be belligerent. And you should assume anyone who comes questioning is not a force for good with your interests at heart. So in terms of that, far be it from me to tell you officially that you should be dishonest or break laws or whatever. But you must recognize the force that writes laws will write laws that will include affirmative action, asset forfeiture. They're writing laws to strip those Dutch farmers that if they refuse to take the 120% of valuation payments, etc., etc. In short, law is literally the doctrine that is perpetuated by the overlording demonic classes that seeks to fulfill an agenda. And you have to decide how much you align with principle and sound money and how much you abide with doctrine perpetuated by a dark force. And this is the dilemma. Do not confuse morality with legality.
Now, another thing you mentioned a couple times in passing is this idea of strategizing and already having thought through the steps of the game, already done simulations, already predicted what the most likely response of the masses will be, that kind of thing, and prepared for that. For people who are wary, who think that that's far-fetched or something, we've even seen revealed in the last 3 or 4 years these global meetings where there are simulations run, gameplays, whether it has to do with pandemics or what it has to do with whatever, is how will this run? And then we see a remarkable emergence of the actual play, where the actual events unfold eerily similar to what was predicted in this simulation. The other thing is, you mentioned the contrast of cunning efficiency, with the siren song of saying, just think of how much more wealthy your life could feel if you didn't have to pay for all these dead weight resources that you're having. I've came out of a 35-year career in industry where just in time and lean manufacturing and all that was, you don't want inventories, you don't want warehouses full of that. It's all just slowing you down. You want to have everything just show up just when it's needed, and there's everything moved like clockwork. And then we saw what happened when the world shut down, and nobody had stockpiles of anything, and everybody was out of everything. And our medical masks, they all came from China and that sort of thing. So versus the preparedness-minded individuals who've been following our channel since 2013, who want to have a larder full of non-perishable food in their home and a source of it in their garden, etc. So you touched on that, I think, briefly when you talked about right sizing of the food supply, etc. Can you circle back again on that topic specifically of why it's in the interests of the overlords that you not have a stockpile of gold and silver, sound money, or foodstuffs, or anything that could sustain you, because that makes you dependent on, may I please have my digital allocation today, sir?
Well, they absolutely need you in that Oliver Twist role that you just described. Can I please have a little more gruel, please, sir? They want you as the orphans in the orphanage with the overlording, cane-wielding master, or sadistic master. And this is the plight of what I'd call a modern technological fascism, where the corporations are the hybridization of real capitalization has actually seen no antitrust law, leading into mega corporatocracies that are small in number and easy to control and mega big. We did in our YouTube channel the Magnificent Seven, both on the US and the luxury Magnificent Seven in the European side, a YouTube about this, and how these are essentially what capitalism has become, the corporate fascism that is cooperating with the Bolshevik communism that is the state. So you actually have these two forces, and we're in the drama triangle, and we are the perps. We are essentially being victimized by these forces, and you are the patsy in the poker game, and you have very powerful forces against you. And your question is circling back to preparation more fully and having resources. I mean, an anecdote for you. I think 50 senators were given satellite phones. This is for crisis communications. I mean, if I've ever heard an advert for ham and CB radio for gold-carrying community members in semi-rural areas for staying in contact, that's it right there. It's quite clear. It's quite clear to me that in the moment, my assessment is we've had 40 years of financialization of everything in the macroeconomic environment. From the Volcker years, where he attempted to rein inflation in legitimately following the Nixon Vietnam War debacle and the decoupling of gold from fiat. So that at least brings gold back into the discussion. We've had a 40-year, 81 to 2020, a 40-year cycle. It ended 40 years of financialization of everything and seeking yield. The key thing was seeking yield. If you listen to Jim Grant, another great American that writes the Interest Rate Observer, everything was seeking yield. And the capital prices were going ever higher and the yield ever lower. Till eventually you're buying this huge, huge fat pig and it's giving you a small cube of bacon. And the value of that pig was getting ever more expensive, and the amount you're actually getting in yield was getting ever less. And we've pivoted. The March 2020 events was the peak of gold-silver ratio. It was the harshest it's ever been for gold. It was the highest point. And at the same time, bonds were never more greatly valued. In other words, they went virtually barely above 0.3 on the US side for the 10-year. Now we are finished. That's a bookmarking economic event. I want to say that era is over. Search for yield era is over. Debt will never be that value again. In fact, it has begun a journey of rallies, minor contractions in the opposite direction, till eventually it's going to, instead of being allowed to go to full zero, we will have an earthquake event. So that's how they will transition you. They will remove the basis for comparison. That is reset moment. So we're in the 40 years of bull of both equity and bond markets. where you just buy the damn dip. It was a meme, but it became a 4-decade-long meme. Now you're in that contraction. Greenspan's Goldilocks economy, where he said inflation had been killed, everyone was productive, they were taking their budgie to work and their dog to work and .com and showing up in shorts and T-shirts and you couldn't find employees, etc. You may remember that era, sort of internet era, 2000, up to 99 to 2000, everyone was changing jobs for 30% increase, etc., etc. You've gone from that supposed productivity miracle, garbage in my view. There was real inflation, but not in the bread and milk checkout store, but in the assets. The inflation went into the assets, so that built a billionaire class. Now we're in the cycle where we need those assets to deflate back down. They're on paying good yields. Capital preservation era began, really in truth, even though we had some gold that was occurring now. And forget about yield. Preserving capital is the game. It doesn't matter you have a minuscule yield in a high inflation environment where it's still a negative yield and the capital value of that bond is contracting immensely. Even though interest rates will go higher to try attract capital, they will not do so. There's a proliferation of debt. So we're in this dark side. And unfortunately, the way there's going to be a difference, we need a reset. So instead of having maybe the 40 years, markets tend to go down disorderly quicker once everybody gets the script than when they go up. Bull markets, you grind higher, have a pullback, you rally again, you grind higher, and it just goes on, and you have a consistently being given small amounts of money. By the time, when you get bear markets, when we've been short, we've made the most money in the shortest time. When you've been right, that is, and you get capitulations. They turn disorderly very quickly because pain is a far higher motivator than greed. So instead of having 40 years symmetrical tail, we're going to have quite serious capitulations on the contraction of assets. And interest rates are the weapon of controlled demolition. Controlled demolition of your personal finances. You might parallel that with other events if you choose to. Controlled demolition of your private finances is interest rates. So sudden spikes, everyone is calling tops. What's the natural game? Oh, we're going to pivot, we're going to call tops. They are going to fool everybody. You may even get a point where they do one or two cuts or they flatline for a while and then it will absolutely spike higher. And that's going to shock the system because nobody's going to predict it. So there was Hartnett of Bank of America who actually said you may see 6% before you see 3%. And I actually think he's right. And it was interesting. Occasionally you get moments of truth even out of the cartel. It was interesting also to see Dimon say interest rates could go higher, they could go 6 or 7. So these people establish alibi, knowing the journey they go, to say, oh, but we did warn you, and you got it wrong, and we are better forecaster than you, and we did say. So they can make reference to, on that date, I said this. And I call this establishing alibi. So it's great for a liar to throw in an occasional truth. And in essence, this is what I feel we're getting. So people should prepare. How do I cull the finances of the American middle class, which is vast and broad? Well, a major spike of interest rates will flush out most people that have finances on cars, credit cards, and homes. And if you have not eliminated debt from every area, you have nanothermite on the structural holdings of your personal finances right now. And then it comes to your gold. You've got to broaden out. You've got to have own in structures. We specialize in that. We have great partners, and you've got to hold outside your country. This is an attack on the West more than any other nation time. If you look at Deagle stats, if you look at many things, I'm afraid I'm a reader in many, many topics beyond just the markets, and maybe it serves me, maybe it doesn't. But the truth of the matter is the West hasn't had its Bolshevik revolution era, where they removed people from farms. It was torturous, barbaric, slaughter, starvation. It was cruel. And I fear that the great opulent middle class, the mass affluent, is the target. In the Commonwealth as well. So I'm not just got America in my sights as concern, Canada, New Zealand, Britain, Europe, etc. So you need to think of other places. Singapore wants to be the sane place of rule of law and isn't China. that isn't China. So you might want to think of their involvement. You want to look at Latin America. You want to look at the semi-sane parts of Africa. You want to have options outside of the Commonwealth, Grand Anglo-Saxon era and range. And that takes you into places of discomfort. And most people think he's probably right, but you know what? I'm going to go back to just carrying on. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know about Singapore. The Orient's a different funny place. It's a long flight, lots of jet lag, and they don't. There are things you can do remotely that will already increase your protection and give you options. And these are how people need to think. They will have a plan for the everyday American gold bug that's just sitting with a stack at home. Without a doubt. It's not even game theory 101. They're going to have a plan for the 3 next move, a semi-smart one will be doing, and they probably have a plan for me and all that I'm trying to, and most of what I'm doing may well fail, but I only need one thing to win. Such is my view and framing. I don't know if that helps.
It does. You brought me back quite pleasantly to a memory of an interview we just did recently with some relatives of ours who are doing a homestead farm and teaching their children how to do gardening, and they're providing fresh eggs to their neighbors and have a stand out in front. And when we talked about how they took on so many new things, both working full-time jobs and all that, and our niece said, well, she says, you try and you fail, and sometimes you don't fail. And that echoed what you were saying, is if you do something intelligently and broadly enough and diversely enough, maybe you just need 1 or 2 parts of that not to fail to help pull you through. But one thing that you mentioned there was a big thing, and that was you've talked about global orchestration of plans for the first half of our talk together, but just now you mentioned this east-west split, and that's come out prominently in discussions recently about the Western economies that are financialized and derivativized and all artificial and based on this sort of house of empty cards of fiat currencies and everything, versus the BRICS plus faction of the East, who are based on commodities, owning real natural resources, physical precious metals, that sort of thing. Do you see a different outcome for the ordinary person, the serf, if you want to think of it, whether that's someone living in the West, where they're in this fat middle class currently, versus someone who's living in all these BRICS plus Eastern countries that are seeming to encourage their populace to own real things, or they're basing that their financial trade is going to be based on real commodities, real things. Is there a different future playing out for people depending on which of these factions they're subject to?
Absolutely. And again, I refer to the thesis and antithesis. So the Western world represents the primary thesis, which is now dying in failure under debt, which includes nations like Japan, by the way, that are aligned Western but appear in the East, versus the emerging BRICS. It's not to say there's no corruption. There's immense corruption in the BRICS nations. I consider the global corruption is embedded in sense, again, through the priestly classes that do things in black markets that they could never admit to doing in the white markets, if you can excuse the phraseology. But we are seeing, and Kissinger is someone worth listening to because they love to sound, they're hell on bent on ego. The wealth will move from west to east. And that's him that said that. And I just tend to listen when that occurs, when he says that. And Jim Rogers, that was an ex-Soros partner that was involved in the shorting on the Bank of England. His kids have learned Mandarin. I think that's a hell of a commitment, and I don't think it's necessary in terms of AI and equipment for speaking, etc. But that just shows his level of commitment to the East, and he's moved to Singapore. So I personally, I look at markets and I see a very strong Singaporean equity market. I think most people will list there. It will become the new London or New York. London and New York kind of split the listing of big equities. You certainly got the tech side in the States on the NASDAQ, and then you're getting a lot of the luxury brands in the European markets. But there's a migration of wealth. I love American people. I've enjoyed the American century. I want to come and visit you now that the mandatory aspect is down. I will be coming to the US. I'd love to meet some of your guests. But we have passed peak America, in my opinion. As good as your lifestyle is now, you may actually take a small dip in the conveniences by moving into any of those best options in the East. But your trend over the next 30 years of life, even a decade, you will see, will be upwards, whilst you will be in a peaking out and downward move on America. Plus, as I've warned, there's going to be these chasms occasionally of earthquake that could see a massive devaluation. And you don't want to get caught in one of the downdraft moments. And I'm not, it feels hard to talk to people who love their country or patriots, etc., and everything and say, leave your home. But I do feel that those that are prepared to consider that and love America from afar and be a tourist in their own country could actually end up better served if they've chosen well and be on the right next elevator up in other areas. And that is something to think about. And I think the need to crush the middle classes will be more draconianly afflicted. You only have to look just north of your border to see the absolute parody of rule and law making and presidential man-child that is possible in the North American complex. Imagine when your equivalent comes. I mean, you're not that excited about your current leader, I'm sure, either. But they will have someone that will bring in an era of absolute resentment to its citizenry, and they will disrespect you, and you will see laws and rules implemented that you could never see. And the hollowing out of the middle class is the objective. Remember, priest class and then unilateral equality. We're all equal. That means serfdom, and that's why you will own nothing. So again, the east to west move. We've also seen this, by the way, bringing this back very starkly to metals. If you had a multi-year chart on the gold fix, interesting choice of words, that the London BMA and New York would do. If you were a net long over the Asian sessions for the last 30 or 40 years, and you were square or short the end of London session into New York, I have the chart. I wish I could bring it and screen share it right now, because I don't know where I'd find it. But essentially, if I draw 3 lines, one that represents the current gold price generally, going like that, over that 40 years, one that represents the gold price just on the US session, and the absolute parabola that is the Eastern session. And I mean, you should have had an algo and a bot and be just having a simple rule and trading this. I mean, it would have been the path to riches on compound interest basis alone in terms of the absolute discrepancy of how it's performed. So it's quite clear, and I had a theory about this that I've put forward before. The gold is actually being priced. So you've got China sitting with $1 trillion of American debt. They're the second biggest holder after the Fed. Why would you hold it and agree to not dump it and just bring this whole event forward? Well, you're being compensated in some other way. What would that be? A discount window is being held open for you to use all other resources and trade surplus returns to purchase precious metals at an artificially low price. The minute you crash the debt markets of the US and say, here's your $1 trillion, good luck with the bid on that. It's a not-for-profit sale. We don't want it. It's going to go to zero. Give us whatever we can get. You're going to bring an end to your own gold discount window that you are clearly exploiting as per the charts that I've already described that has been running for the better part of 3 decades. So essentially, you're compensating me for holding your bad asset. And as long as I don't acknowledge it as an absolutely rotten asset, I can keep getting my counter compensation measure. I'm going to stack, and I'm going to let it go for as long as possible. But I'm not adding to that bad asset, and occasionally I'm selling a little bit of it off. So they have been coming down as things get more hostile politically, and eventually they will be left holding some that will be largely tokenized to next to nothing.
Cost of doing business of owning a golden, the goose that lays the golden egg. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been, by the way, that's my entire hypothesis. I have no proof. I'm just looking and applying rationale. How do these things exist for that long? How does someone get a benefit? And we know there is flow. So you go to Shanghai, they are receiving imports as the biggest miner and provider. So you're talking about a black hole for gold. You're digging up the most in the whole world, and you're bringing it in from everywhere else. Geez, these guys are stacking on an unbelievable scale. They are the ultimate stackers. And when people finally say, okay, who's got what, I think the world's going to be shocked. You can forget all guesses. I can tell you, as someone who's a South African citizen as well as a citizen of many other places in the world, which I greatly recommend, there is a blood gold market that never gets talked about. You all heard about Leonardo DiCaprio in Blood Diamonds, and he put on his South African accent and he played that role in the movie, and De Beers sanitizing it all, of course. There is absolutely a subsistence mining, and not just in gold, in cobalt and many other things that is required for this battery revolution that is deeply inefficient, has no morality to it. It's amazing how gold mine's bad, silver mine's bad, but lithium scratching in the dirt by Ghanaians' children is good because it's Tesla, etc., it's green. But anyway, that minor little confusing dichotomy aside, there is an absolute gold mining cartel. I've just finished a 5-part series on the gold mafia in southern Africa. These people are running up to Dubai and getting it melted down, turned into bars. It is washed. It is a laundromat for ill-gotten gains on finances. People are getting gold bars. They sell it in Dubai. Dubai has vending machines for gold, don't forget. I think they also have Bitcoin vending machine. But anyway, that Middle Eastern axis is part and parcel of what I would call the Israel frenemy Arabian, and there's a massive laundering of African blood gold. And I've never heard anyone use the phrase. It's far more blood gold. There are people that are collapsed, they're scratching with spades and shovels. It's all subsistence mining. And then there's official mining. So they have, again, the white system and the black market. And they like to they keep the black market alive. You've seen politicians actively being brought evidence and not closing it because that's your laundromat for hot and dirty money. You have your official returns that goes to an official mine that has a license, and you have the second highway. It's fascinating. So, and where does that Dubai gold end up? It's going a large amount to China. We've had big holders that have actually taken their gold out of Switzerland and prefer to use our solutions for vaulting that are non-governmental, have no politically exposed people, that are not bank related, and they've even taken out of Switzerland to do that. They've had their metals moved. I'm talking about 1,000-ounce bars of silver moved out of Europe. And we also like Singapore. But at the end of the day, many things will fail. And you've got to recognize that. But we are thinking even more about that fact of failure. And you have to look at which nation states are going down, have peak trend, and which ones are at bottoms that are likely to go up. And, people, I will laugh, people could do better off in Crimea, if you like a warm sun, or in Russia, in some senses, in terms of trend, than they could potentially in America. That's not to say you're going to get the same service standards initially when you land, but the news flow and the growth and the natural investment could actually be more uplifting and trending better than they are in your current locale, say in the States or Canada right now. And you have to position for the next. This is the Gretzky quote, so I'm using a lot of American type. Skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it is now. And that's, that was a simplistic calculation. He was very good at predicting the plays and moving to the next stage because it's such a fast game. And in essence, I'm saying to the North American complex, you have underthought how dangerous your enemy is. You need to do more. It's not just, okay, I got gold, invisible security blanket, safe, all bullets bounce off. You need to think about that. You need to look at experts. You need to look at how it's held. And you need to use their weapons, foundations, trusts, cross locations. There will be cracks, even though this is a transnational enemy. And I would say that's the fulcrum of my message.
It's a broad and deep message. It's going to be more visits we're going to have to try to delve into different aspects of that and what are actionable parts that people can undertake as initial steps, since it can be overwhelming to try to tackle that whole thing all at once. As long as you're quoting Wayne Gretzky, you might as well quote Warren Buffett, who said the 19th century belonged to Britain, the 20th century belonged to the United States, and the 21st century belongs to China. Invest accordingly. So if people want to find more about your work, Francis, where should they go?
We have a vibrant community with lots of North Americans and Americans on the marketsniper.com. We insist on booking a call. It's the only way to engage with us. And we chat with you. Previous members only take calls. We don't have salespeople. We have a YouTube called The Market Sniper, where we look to build wealth in reset times. We look at these structurals. The amazing thing, and I want to just say this as well, Dunnigan, if you'll just allow. I've said a lot of things that are quite dark about where we are. But actually, for the alive mind, there's never more opportunity. We're talking a bit about China. There's a word, crisis, and it has a dual meaning of opportunity. In actual fact, those that care enough to learn the depth, the detail of everything, of how the world operates, within these huge crises will actually be the ones that will be able to and safely exploit unbelievable opportunity. You do not get intense darkness without the morning looking ever brighter when it comes. And taking action is a mental step. Do not fall into depression. Oh, it's a big, dark, old word. Take any form of action and you feel engaged and alive, and it will lead to more and more action. The key thing is to start. Inertia is your enemy. These things are happening. Take action to protect your family, yourself, and your finances. My community is focused on that. You can follow us on YouTube at The Market Sniper and also at The Crypto Sniper for those that are interested.
Well, thank you, Francis Hunt, for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance. We look forward to our next conversation. And on behalf of all of our viewers, just thanks for joining us. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.